There is a real road in New Jersey called Ongs Hat. It leads into the Pine Barrens, past forests, old roads, and the remains of a settlement that almost disappeared. On the internet, though, Ongs Hat became something much stranger. A hidden community, a group of scientists, a machine called the Egg, and a gateway to another dimension. The obvious question is, did the portal exist? The better question is, who built the evidence around it? Because by the end of this story, some people were not just reading about Ongs Hat. They were looking for the author. They were knocking on his door. And some of them were sleeping in his yard, waiting for an answer. This is not a verified account of interdimensional travel. It is an investigation into an internet legend. The real place behind it, the documents that made it look authentic, and the community that slowly started treating fiction as hidden history. We will keep 4 categories separate. That may sound like a technical distinction, but it is also the heart of the story. Ongs Hat became powerful because those categories were made to overlap. The Pine Barrens look empty. They are not. They are full of traces, old industries, forgotten settlements, roads that continue after the buildings are gone, and names that outlive the people who use them. One of those names is Ongs Hat. The location is associated with Ongs Hat Road and the remains of a former settlement in Burlington County, New Jersey. Local accounts describe overgrown foundations, rubble, and a place with no permanent population. Even the name comes with a story. One version says that a man named Ong was known for dancing and for wearing a distinctive silk hat. After a conflict at a dance, the hat was thrown into a tree and stayed there long enough to become a landmark. It is a memorable story. It is also a local legend, not a detail we can verify in every part. That is enough to give the place a certain shape, an unusual name, a remote location, and a fading memory with room for another version. In 1936, Henry Charlton Beck published Forgotten Towns of Southern New Jersey, a book about communities disappearing from the landscape. Later, Ongs Hat material referred back to this kind of local history. The place did not begin as a portal. It began as a name on a real landscape. A fictional town can be dismissed immediately. A real town gives the audience somewhere to look. Ongs Hat was remote enough to be hard to check, but real enough to find on a map. The name sounded invented, but it appeared in historical references. The surrounding Pine Barrens already had a reputation for local mysteries. That is a perfect setting for a legend. The place exists, but it does not explain itself. A real road can become the address of a fictional organization. A real book can sit beside an invented one. A real scientist can end up inside a story that never happened at all. Geography gives the fiction coordinates, and in the late 1980s, someone began designing the rest. Ongs Hat did not begin as a mysterious web page. According to academic research, Ongs Hat, Gateway to the Dimensions, appeared in 1988 as a short story in a science fiction zine. The text was associated with Peter Lamborn Wilson, also known as Hakim Bey. Joseph Matheny saw a way to turn that story into something that looked like an underground document. With Wilson and visual artist James Coinline, he helped reshape it into a photocopied brochure. No normal publisher, no clear context, and no obvious reason it should have arrived in the reader's mailbox. The brochure was distributed through a remailing system in Hong Kong to addresses in the United States. To the recipient, it could feel as if it had come from a hidden network. That presentation was not decoration. It was the mechanism. The document did not simply say that a secret existed. It made the reader feel like they had found one. A normal book tells you what it is. A photocopied pamphlet with strange typography and missing context asks you to investigate it. It changes the reader's role, not audience, researcher. The Ongs hat materials understood a simple trick. Evidence has a look. Old paper feels more authentic than a clean page. An anonymous author feels more dangerous than a named one. Scientific vocabulary makes a claim sound precise, even when the claim itself is not testable. Ong's hat used all of that. It placed remote locations, obscure groups, real names, and technical ideas beside invented events. A real name does not authenticate the claims around it. It only gives the claims a bridge into the real world. The original Incunabula Papers even described the boundary between truth and fiction as something that can blur like a fractal basin boundary. 3. That line tells us how the project wants to be read, not as a normal story, but as something that can support several interpretations at once. Still, ambiguity is not proof. A document can be designed to feel uncertain without being historically true. A simple hoax wants you to believe it. Ong's hat was more flexible. If you rejected it, it could be fiction. If you believed it, every denial could become another layer of concealment. That is why the story could survive both reactions. The next layer was the Incunabula catalog, allegedly compiled by Emery Cranston. It presented itself as a catalog of rare books, manuscripts, scientific studies, testimonies, journals, and curious materials. Some references were real, others did not exist. That mixture made the catalog difficult to check quickly. A real book could make the next entry feel plausible. A real scientific name could make an invented institution feel legitimate. The reader had to follow the chain. A name led to a book. The book led to an idea. The idea led to a character. The character led to an interview. And the interview stopped just before the answer. The missing link became the next clue. That was the engine of the archive. Never give the reader nothing, but never give them enough to stop searching. At the end of 1992, Matheny published a journal entry dated October 13th. It was presented as a transcription of an interview with Nick Herbert, a real physicist whose name appeared in the Incunabula material. In the narrative, Herbert discusses quantum tantra, alternate dimensions, and the egg devices associated with interdimensional travel. Then the conversation stops. In 1994, another text appeared, a phone interview with Emery Cranston, the supposed editor of the catalog. Cranston claims knowledge of the interdimensional group and describes a journey to an alternate Earth. That interview also ends abruptly. This is the important distinction. A real person can appear inside a fictional narrative without endorsing it. A transcript can exist as a text without proving that the conversation happened as described. The closer readers looked, the more material they found. But more material did not necessarily mean more truth. It meant the fiction had more architecture. In 1993, Matheny began posting the Ongs hat texts on bulletin board systems, or BBS networks. There was no recommendation algorithm sending the story to millions of people. No official page explained the premise. Readers found pieces through messages, links, and other readers. The search itself became part of the experience. When the wider internet became more common, the archive moved with it. Metheny created Incunabula.org and related sites. Pages, images, graphics, and hyperlinks connected different parts of the story. The story was no longer just a brochure, it was a map. The site did not only tell people what happened, it asked them to decide which page mattered, which name was real, and which coincidence meant something. And once readers were searching together, the author no longer had complete control of the myth. Independent discussion platforms appeared around the story. Participants shared theories, compared documents, described experiences, and planned trips to Ongs Hat. Some were skeptical, some were curious. Others believed the papers were authentic, or at least based on something real. Between 1999 and 2001, the story reached its peak of interest. Some participants connected it to dreams, synchronicities, voices, and sightings they interpreted as supernatural. We cannot treat those experiences as proof, but they are important evidence of what the story had become. The community was no longer only discussing the archive. It was using the archive to interpret life outside it. A coincidence became a possible clue. The clue was discussed. The discussion gave it a place inside the mythology. Then the mythology made the next coincidence feel more important. The legend did not need a new document every time. The readers were producing new material themselves. In 2000, Metheny appeared on Coast to Coast AM. For some members of the community, this was the crack in the illusion. If Metheny was connected to the project, perhaps Ongs Hat was a hoax created for attention. For others, the appearance made the mystery deeper. Maybe Metheny was only pretending to be the author. Maybe the interview was another layer. Maybe the person explaining the story was protecting it. The same event could support opposite conclusions. That is what happens when a story teaches its audience to treat contradictions as clues. Then the consequences became real. According to the academic record, some committed members became convinced that Metheny knew the truth. They tracked him down, knocked on his door, looked through his windows, and slept in his yard. The project had begun as an experiment in ambiguity. Now people were behaving as if the ambiguity were a real threat. The portal had not opened, but the fiction had crossed into the behavior of its audience. In August 2001, Metheny posted a statement on the main message board. It included the words, "Ongs Hat Tantric Egg Research Center was a necessary ruse." That should have ended the mystery. But Ongs Hat had trained its audience not to accept simple explanations. Some readers were disappointed, some were angry, others treated the statement as another layer in the game. This is the paradox at the center of the legend. A story designed to blur fiction and reality can make the author's explanation look like part of the fiction. The better the project became at creating uncertainty, the less power its creator had to end it. After the 2001 statement, the community slowly dispersed. Forums were abandoned and eventually disappeared from the live web. But disappearing is not the same as being erased. The surviving archive continued to circulate. People still traveled into the Pine Barrens looking for the gate, sometimes seriously, sometimes ironically, and sometimes with both attitudes at once. The original network was gone, but the story had become internet folklore. A later academic study describes Ongs Hat not as one text, but as a textual complex. Documents, interviews, videos, audio recordings, chats, and the interpretations produced by hundreds of participants. The portal was not the only thing that could travel between dimensions. The story had moved from paper to people. Here is what the surviving record supports. Nothing in the surviving evidence independently proves that the portal existed. But that does not mean nothing happened. Something happened to the people who read the story. Something happened to the way they searched. Something happened to who counted as a witness. In a later interview, Matheny explained that he thought the text contained enough clues to stop people from taking it completely seriously. Then he admitted he had been wrong. I was imagining that there was enough clues in the text that people would not take it seriously completely. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that I was wrong about that. This is probably the closest Ong's hat comes to a final answer. Not that the portal was real, not that every reader was fooled, but that a story can be written as fiction and still produce real belief, real fear, real investigation, and real consequences. The strangest thing about Ong's hat is not that a portal may have existed. It is that a story built from paper, hyperlinks, fake documents, real names, and unanswered questions became real enough to change the behavior of the people who believed it. Ong's hat was a real place. The archive was a constructed story. The community was real. The experiences were personal. Those facts do not cancel one another. A real location gave the fiction coordinates. The fiction gave the location a hidden history. The archive gave readers something to search. The readers gave the archive a life beyond its creator. Maybe that is what an internet legend really is. Not a fact that no one can explain. Not a lie that everyone believes. A story that lives between evidence and participation. A story that keeps asking the reader to decide what counts as real. And perhaps that is why Ong's hat refuses to disappear. Not because the gate was ever proven, because someone built a door and the audience decided to keep looking for it. If you found the Ong's hat archive today, how would you classify it? A real case? An ARG? Or internet folklore? And where do you think evidence ends and participation begins? Leave your answer below.